Today is officially the mark of week one. Today's Monday. It's officially the first week of the NFL season. A lot of you guys are probably drafting tonight on Labor Day. Maybe you're drafting tomorrow still, but I would imagine a lot of you guys have already drafted your fantasy football teams. And for those of you, we are going to be breaking down 12 players to stash before week one. These could be players that you drop your defense or your kickers for and put them on the end of your bench just in case. These could be players to carry into the first couple weeks of the season. If you have a free bench spot, drop your second quarterback. If you have Josh Allen, drop your second tight end. If you have Travis Kelce, whatever the case is, we are going to cover 12 players to stash before week one. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, we're going to start it off. You guys can see the t-shirt that I'm wearing right now. Stash number one is Sean Tucker, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now available in 89% of leagues. J.C. Allen of Sports Illustrated and Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report, two very trusted sources of mine as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, have both confirmed what all of us have pretty much suspected this entire offseason, that Chase Edmonds and Keyshawn Vaughn are not going to be the number two running back behind Rachaad White. It is going to be Sean Tucker. He's reportedly won that job for my money based on my college grades, based on what I saw from both he and Rachaad White coming out of college. He is the better pure runner of the two. We know that Sean Tucker went undrafted because of medical concerns. It was not because of his talent. He was a third or fourth round type of talent. He was on par with guys like Devon Achane and Kendre Miller and Tajay Spears, guys who went in the third round of the NFL draft. Tucker is the guy that I want in this backfield given the cost, because I know he comes for my last round pick, potentially as an undrafted free agent. He is the perfect stash for your bench right now because you can pick him up, drop your defense, drop whatever, drop your second quarterback, hold him for a week or two early on in the season. If White is a workhorse, which I don't anticipate, I think they're going to work in another running back along Rachaad White, cut bait with Sean Tucker and keep churning the waiver wire. But I will say, I do think Sean Tucker is the better pure runner of this duo, and I think he will carve out a role early on in the NFL season. So, stash number two, another guy for early on in the year, Dion Jackson of the Indianapolis Colts. He's available right now in 70% of leagues, although that number is getting more and more popular because Jonathan Taylor, of course, is out for the first 4 games of the season. He is on the PUP list, potentially more if he does end up getting traded or if he does end up continuing to hold out. I will say that I think Zach Moss was probably in line to be the number 2 back before he got injured in training camp. Dion Jackson is the more usable option early on, but I do think Zach Moss, if you guys have an IR spot or if you can stash him on your bench as well, are both good pickups, especially for those of you guys that are running like 0 RBs or hero RBs, or maybe you guys drafted Breece Hall, or you have Jonathan Taylor, or you have Javonte Williams, or you have Cooper Kupp, and you kind of just need somebody to put into your flex spot for week one. The offense probably won't be prolific. Hell, it'll probably be bad because it'll be Anthony Richardson in his first NFL start, but I do think that Dion Jackson should get some volume, viable enough volume to make him a back-end RB2, high-end RB3. So if you're looking for some production, Dion Jackson is a good stash as well. Stash number 3, Chase Brown, available right now in 92% of sleeper leagues. He is the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was their 5th round pick. More of a late season play in my opinion, so this is more of a long-term stash than it is a short-term stash like some of the other guys I've talked about, because I expect Joe Mixon to come out and be entrenched as the week 1 starter, probably get a good amount of volume early on in the season. With Chase Brown being a rookie, with the fact that, you know, he was a little bit more unproven, he was a little bit more of a late round pick, I don't mind burning a roster spot for a couple of weeks on Chase Brown, kind of just to wait and see what happens, see how this backfield develops, because I think he could be a key contributor once inevitably Joe Mixon shows that he's over the hill and, you know, starts to seed work in this backfield to Chase Brown, to Chris Evans. I will expect that some of these other Bengals running backs start mixing in, pun intended, because I don't think Joe Mixon's very good. I think he's washed up. I think he's going to be a detriment to this team, and I think eventually they're going to want to move to more fresh legs, and Chase Brown to me is the most talented back at this point in Joe Mixon's career in that backfield. There was once a time where Joe Mixon was a good running back, not so much anymore, hence why they almost cut this guy, having no real backup plan behind him. If you need the roster space, just keep Chase Brown on waiver wire speed dial. You don't necessarily need to stash him right now, but definitely keep him in mind. The second I see him inch towards Joe Mixon's workload is the second I want to have him on my roster. Stash number 4, another guy that I loved coming out of the NFL draft this past year, was Josh Downs, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts, available right now in 93% of sleeper leagues. Downs is one that could pay off immediately, in my opinion, because we don't really know what to expect out of Anthony Richardson. But the one thing I do know about Anthony Richardson is that he is the type of quarterback that's going to be inaccurate early on. He's the type of quarterback that's going to need a reliable over-the-middle target, and Josh Downs has already won that job. He's already the day one slot receiver. He beat out Isaiah McKenzie, who was eventually cut. Downs is the easiest target to hit of this group of pass catchers with Pittman, with Alec Pierce. Those guys are a little bit more downfield options because Josh Downs is a short area separator. He can be an easy completion for Anthony Richardson, which is crucial for him because he's probably going to be very inaccurate early on in the season. Josh Downs is also hyper talented. He was a very good prospect. He was my wide receiver 5 pre-draft, and I had him right there with Quentin Johnston, right there with Zay Flowers. He pretty much just fell in the draft due to the fact that he's small, due to the fact that he's like 170 pounds. He was a third-round pick, but he probably should have been a high second-round pick based on his pure prospect profile. So he's a good option as well. Next, we get into stash number 5, which is Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver of the New England Patriots. He's available everywhere. He's literally available in 100% of leagues right now. It's a deep cut, but hear me out. The reason I like Kendrick Bourne as a stash, if you guys are in deeper leagues especially, is because Juju and Devontae Parker are not really good receivers anymore. They're a little bit washed. They're a little slow. In Mac Jones' rookie year, Kendrick Bourne had 800 yards and 5 touchdowns on just 70 targets. As a part-time player, pretty much, he wasn't even on the field full-time. With Bill O'Brien coming in and, of course, Matt Patricia leaving because him and Kendrick Bourne had some kind of beef, if we get a better Mac Jones this year, if he takes a step forward, if he looks more like his rookie year self, Kendrick Bourne might be the new Jacoby Myers. He might be this late-round option that we get as a PPR play, mainly for deep leagues and leagues with a lot of flexes. I think he's a great, great stash. You'll probably know what you have in Kendrick Bourne right from game 1, and we actually saw in the most recent preseason game where Mac Jones played that Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Kendrick Bourne were the starting 3 wide receivers in 3 wide receiver sets, and I do think Kendrick Bourne is the most talented of that group, at least from what we've seen from him in the last 2 seasons. So stash number 6, another rookie, Marvin Mims, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos. He was a second-round pick of the Broncos this past year. 73% of leagues right now on Sleeper, he is available. Jerry Jeudy is expected to be out a couple games. It's been reported that it's going to be at least 2 games. I've seen some reports say it's going to be 5 or 6 games. Either way, Marvin Mims is a good stash because Courtland Sutton regressed last year. He might be starting to get a little bit slow. Tim Patrick is out for the year, of course, and then Greg Dulcich at the tight end position is in a tight end by committee, and their running game, Javonte Williams coming off a torn ACL, they're probably going to ramp him up. They're going to need somebody to step up early on in the season if Jerry Jeudy is out. Marvin Mims was a day one producer at Oklahoma in college, and he may have to be a day one producer in the NFL as well. First draft pick made by Sean Payton as the new coaching staff coming in here. He was a solid prospect. He had a good profile. Again, age-adjusted production metrics would have really liked him. And second-round draft capital in a suddenly barren wide receiver core, at least to start the year. It's pretty much just going to be Courtland Sutton and Marvin Mims. And like I said, I don't think Courtland Sutton is all that good at this point in his career, so give me Marvin Mims to be a potential day one contributor as a flex option, or I wouldn't be shocked if this guy's the number 1 waiver ad after the first game of the season as well. So stash number 7 is Michael Wilson, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. Again, another rookie receiver here, available in 95% of sleeper leagues. He is going to be a day one starter for a Cardinals offense that has room for contributors. It's pretty much just Marquise Brown there, and Michael Wilson had good film at Stanford. He's also the biggest wide receiver, the only guy that's above like 6 foot in this wide receiver core, and his numbers probably would have been a lot better coming out of college if he wasn't injured all the time, but they're going to be throwing. The Cardinals are a bad team. They're first in odds right now to have the projected number 1 overall pick, and Hollywood Brown can't catch everything. So if Michael Wilson could play, he's going to be on the field the second most of any of the pass catchers because we have a tight end by committee. The running back position, it's James Conner. He doesn't really catch a whole lot of passes. And then aside from Marquise Brown, I don't really have a lot of faith in, Rondell Moore and other guys there. So give me Michael Wilson as an upside swing for a team that should have a lot of garbage time production, should be throwing quite a bit. Stash number 8 is Deuce Vaughn, running back of the Dallas Cowboys, available in 85% of sleeper leagues right now. Malik Davis was cut, and that's a crucial thing for Deuce Vaughn because the Cowboys didn't sign anybody, nor did they, kind of have any kind of backup plan behind Tony Pollard for the early down role. I thought they would bring in maybe a Leonard Fournette or a Dalvin Cook or something like that to be the grinder between the tackles. And what that tells me, the fact that they didn't do that, is that Tony Pollard will be that guy. He's going to be the guy that gets all the early down work, gets all the goal line work, and that leaves the potential change of pace, pass catcher role that Tony Pollard previously occupied for a guy like Deuce Vaughn, who's, in my opinion, the second most talented running back in this backfield. Rico Dowdle and all these other guys. Ronald Jones suspended 2 games. Maybe he's the early down guy when he comes back. Deuce Vaughn might have been one of the most talented backs in the last draft class. The only problem with Deuce Vaughn is that he's 5'5" or 5'6", 170 pounds. So had that not been the case, if he was like 5'9", 200 pounds, he probably would have been a second or third round pick. I comped him to Tariq Cohen coming out because I really do love what I saw from him from like an elusiveness standpoint. He just kind of moves differently out there. It's literally like tackling, a chicken running away from you because Deuce Vaughn's so small, so elusive. So Deuce Vaughn is a guy that I think can contribute right away as a pass catcher. Dak Prescott isn't really the most mobile guy at this point in his career. He's over 30 now. He hasn't really run the same as he used to early on in his career. So I do think there's actually a role in mind for a guy like Deuce Vaughn to contribute as a pass catcher out of the backfield, potentially on special teams as well. Stash number 9 of this video is Gus Edwards, who is available right now in 78% of sleeper leagues. I would call Gus Edwards like the perfect pump and dump for week 1. If you guys just want to stash one player, know what you have in week 1, and then cut bait with him, Gus Edwards is the perfect guy because we'll know what the split looks like with him and J.K. Dobbins after the first game. And even if it is Dobbins leading the backfield, you can probably still hold Gus Edwards if you wanted to, because J.K. Dobbins has missed a ton of time over the past couple years. Gus Edwards averages 5 yards per carry over the course of his career. If he was ever entrusted with the early down workload on the ground, he'd be, the big time contributor that we thought he was going to be for that like week window a couple years ago when J.K. Dobbins went down with the injury. There was like a week where Gus Edwards was being drafted in like the 4th, 5th round, and then of course he tore his ACL as well. So we didn't really get any of that production, but just like J.K. Dobbins, he's now 2 years removed from that injury. So Gus Edwards is a guy that I think is a good late round dart throw, a good stash for the end of your bench as well. And also, potentially, he could be a good stash for you heading into the season because there's still, like, rumors that J.K. Dobbins isn't healthy, still rumors that J.K. Dobbins, is trying to hold in or whatever the case is. So even if you had to drop your defense for a couple days before week 1 and then cut bait with Gus Edwards if nothing happens, I think he's a decent candidate for that as well. Stash number 10, a couple more guys, and then we'll close out this video. Tank Dell, wide receiver of the Houston Texans, available in 71% of sleeper leagues right now. Aside from the whole, like, corny narrative that he's going to, like, say every wide receiver's name taken ahead of him in the NFL draft, just like Amon-Ra St. Brown did a couple years ago, Tank Dell is an interesting prospect. CJ Stroud wanted this guy, right? He banged the table for him. He's like, in the 3rd round, go get this guy. Nico Collins, Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz, none of these guys really impress you. I think that there's some guys there that can contribute, but I think if Tank Dell is talented and he is the type of receiver prospect that we think he could be like this year's Wan'Dale Robinson. There was a period of time before Wan'Dale tore his ACL that he was really starting to stand out in that group of Giants pass catchers, and there was a good chance that he was going to end up being like a pretty decent contributor down the stretch. And I think that with Tank Dell, you're getting a small slot receiver type for a great passing prospect of a quarterback like CJ Stroud, who's gotten better so far in the preseason, and there's very little there at wide receiver. So sometimes when there's nothing there at wide receiver, there's just going to be nothing there, and none of these guys might be fantasy relevant, which is very possible. But other than Nico Collins, I'm not really excited about anybody from this receiver core. I'm not really excited about Dalton Schultz, not really excited about Robert Woods or John Mechie or anybody else that's there. I think Tank Dell was brought in to play a specific role, probably as a slot receiver, and I do think that CJ Stroud is going to look his way, and probably him and Stroud have already developed some pretty good chemistry so far. So I really like Tank Dell as a late round stash, a late round sleeper. Stash number 11 is Clyde EdwardsHelaire. And I know this is disgusting. Trust me, I'm the guy that's been off of Clyde EdwardsHelaire pretty much every season, but he is available in 78% of sleeper leagues right now. Isaiah Pacheco is coming into the season with an injury, which is definitely crucial because he could re-aggravate that early on in the year. And then pretty much they have nobody else outside of Clyde EdwardsHelaire and then, Deneric Prince and a couple other guys in that backfield, because I think Jerick McKinnon will stay in his role. No matter what happens to Isaiah Pacheco, I think he will just be a pass-catching running back. He's like 30 years old. If it wasn't for a strong stretch last year, Nobody would give a shit about Jerick McKinnon. We wouldn't be scared of him. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even though he hasn't been good, has been pretty productive anytime he's gotten any kind of workload. He's gotten carries. He's been able to score some touchdowns here and there. And the Chiefs running back, name cachet, if he were to ever work into a full workload, would make a great trade chip as well. You could trade him plus like a Cortland Sutton or a Gabe Davis and get up to like a better wide receiver in season. So if you guys need some depth potentially at running back, I don't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is that bad of a stash. I think he's worth throwing on the end of your bench in the off chance that he ends up getting a few weeks with like 15 plus touches. So stash number 12, the final stash of this video, are all of the rookie tight ends. So Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave, Michael Mayer, there's probably some other guys that you can include in that list, but these three guys specifically because they have already been, winning out their starting job. And there's a good chance that Sam Laporta and Luke Musgrave are rostered in your leagues already because they're pretty much going in like the top 14 rounds of ADP. But Michael Mayer was the best prospect of any tight end in this class, and he should be widely available. All three of these guys, including Dalton Kincaid as well, who's going way earlier, have pretty much won out their starting jobs, which is really rare for a tight end prospect to do, but we probably should have seen this coming. A lot of NFL draft scouts who have been in this industry for a long time, Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, all these guys have said that this tight end class was one of the best, if not the best, that they have ever seen since they started scouting. So it should stand to reason that if any tight end class is going to break the whole rookie tight ends never produce narrative, it'll be this one. And with Sam Laporta, you're getting the day one starting tight end for a really good offense that only has Amon-Ra St. Brown to throw to. With Luke Musgrave, you're getting the starting tight end for a bit of a wild card of a quarterback in Jordan Love, but pretty much Christian Watson's the only guy that's established there. So Luke Musgrave as the starting tight end could carve himself out a nice role. Michael Mayer's in a worse offense, and they have Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs to, load up all the offensive production to, but that means Michael Mayer is going to be freed up to kind of run over the middle of the field. We know this team can use Darren Waller really well, and I think that Michael Mayer is kind of their new Darren Waller. So with Michael Mayer, I'm relying mostly on the prospect profile because, like I said, I think he was the best prospect of these guys, but he also has a pretty distinguished role as well, and he's already won out the starting job. So even if you already have a great tight end, maybe you have Kelsey or, Pitts or Kittle or something like that, and you just want to stash some guy for upside on the end of your bench, even if you intend to trade him, if he hits right away, I think you'll find out really quickly what we have in these tight ends, Laporta, Musgrave, and Michael Mayer. I'm pretty sure after like the first 2 weeks of the season, we'll know if these guys are going to be fantasy relevant or not, or at least, really fantasy relevant to the point that they need to be rostered. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As you might have noticed, today is actually my 25th birthday. I did not mention it off the top because a lot of you guys wished me happy birthday on the Sleepers video. I had to drop that video 2 days earlier than I usually drop it. This time, of course, if you want to leave happy birthday in the comments, I'm not going to stop you from boosting us up in the YouTube algorithm, but I didn't want to fish for birthday wishes yet again. So I really appreciate all of you guys who sent me birthday wishes in that video. Again, of course, check out our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, if you want to support us. Use the promo code FSE to get our weekly start sit rankings and our draft guide if you guys haven't drafted yet. With a $10 deposit on Underdog, you'll get both of those things for free. And of course, with the season coming up now, those weekly start sit rankings are a lot more valuable. You'll know who we're starting in week one. Those weekly start sit rankings are done from the perspective of who we would start, not necessarily trying to win the rankings contests or whatever the case is. So if that interests you, definitely check that out. Link down below in the description. If you want to like and subscribe and all that good stuff, we really appreciate it. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.